There's a discussion taking place at the moment about, in the USA, for example, about anti-Christian bias and how that's affecting people in job applications and just in general. And I have to find it quite funny because you have to look at quite a big picture here. Is there bias against Christians? Is there bias against certain religions? Well, let's take it to the truth. Let's see what's actually happening out in the world. So the majority of headlines are about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. That is where the news headlines are going to. In the UK, it's quite easy to see what is happening. But this conversation is not about that. This conversation is about, is there an active anti-Christian bias? And it's very hard to say yes or no on this one. Has Christianity in the last 12 years become a laughing stock? Yes, it has. Why? Well, when you look at who are the poster children of Christianity, and that's regardless of the denomination. The poster children are not the ones that you would like to have as poster children, not the ones that you would like to have. They're standing and promoting the religion. We all remember the infamous Bible, upside down Bible, that was in Trump's first term to try and show defiance, or that he couldn't tell you what is his favorite book in the Bible, his favorite verse. Um, and those were the kinds of, and then also the over the top laying of hands in the White House. Now we go fast forward a couple of years, and we're where we are now. And there's a movement by the Department of Justice saying that there's an anti-Christian bias in hiring practices. Now, are Christians being laughed at and made fun of? Yes. But that's happening everywhere. That's happening with regardless of religion or anything. It's happening everywhere. What makes this a bit more interesting is that it's a government institution in a country that's predominantly says they're Christian, not predominantly says they're Christian, and that they have a bias against them in hiring practices. If you take a step back and you look at actually what would be these practices, it would come down to racism. The people who are not receiving job offers, if you do go into their social media posts or history or anything that comes out from their side, you would come out that you would realize that a lot of what they say is racist. There's a lot of, and it's being used as a propaganda tool to say, oh no, it's anti-Christian. Let's look at who are these Christians that are standing on the forefront saying that we need to do certain things. Well, load of televangelists. Now, televangelists are a breed unto their own because they don't preach the gospel, they don't preach Christ, and they're the ones that's also flooding the zone in the White House, standing with their hands and praying for a man who is, well, as Tucker Carlson recently said, is the Antichrist. We have that image. We've got those people, and those kind of people are the ones that's going around saying there's an anti-Christian bias. Sean Hannity now says he's not a Catholic anymore. Why? Because he says that the Pope doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to theology. Now, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't have to say anything about theity or anything to the Pope. But I do value that the man has spent his whole life learning the Bible. There is no anti-Christian bias within hiring practices. There's anti-racist. You don't want somebody coming into your business who has racist views, who has nationalist views that will upset your workforce and the people that work around them. You don't want to have people in your organization in the USA that would cause rifts. That is what we're looking at. If a person can do the job, they would be hired for the job. But then there comes a bit more. There's a difference between somebody flipping burgers in McDonald's or somebody who works in a white collar job in an office working on projects that are worth quite a bit of money. And there you start looking at cohesion. You start looking at their values. Do they actually, will they be forming part of a good team? And it's not about religion. Luckily in the UK, we've got really strict hiring laws. And that's amazing because we have to abide by those laws. And it's regardless of what the person's religion or race or sex or orientation is, it's about if they can do the job. And that you determine in the interview process. So, do I think there's a bias against Christians? No. Do I think Christianity has become a laughing stock? Yes. Do I think Christians have become something that the Bible says we're not? Yes. Because if you go into what is in the Bible, and you look at what Jesus said, you look at what Jesus preached, conservatism, as the Conservative Party or the Tories are, or the Republicans, none of their values are biblical. Small state, God doesn't really speak about that. Abortion laws, not really mentioned. There are things in the Bible which, yes, you would say the Bible says mentions it and see, it would be viewed as sin. But does it say that you have to throw away the person? No, it says to love the person. That's what Jesus did. He loved the person. He didn't go out of his way to call them scum or to say that they're influencing the people around them. No, he just said, love them. So when you want to use the religious aspect and say that you are having a bias against you, maybe first realize what that religion stands for. What is Christianity at its core? At its core. Not what televangelist tells you on TV. Not what they spout from their private jets flying to their 10,000, 20,000 seater auditoriums. That's not Christianity. I grew up evangelical. And there's good points. There's negative points, as with all religions. But the one thing that I always was so happy to see in my local church, and then it all went to hell, as always, was the community inside. But human nature is selfish. Human nature wants what it wants for itself. And then what does it do? It distorts and destroys that which is good. That's a whole different topic for a different day. But my standpoint and my viewpoint at the moment is what we're saying is Christianity. And some of the comments that I've seen come through says I need to read the Bible more. Well, yeah, I could read a bit more, but I could also ask you to interpret it better. Are you reading the Bible literally? Or are you reading it as a number of stories? Because if we had to go to literalism, then every one of you have fallen short. And I mean seriously short. Every single one on the MAGA train and on the Reform train and on these UK marches, you've fallen seriously short because nothing what you're doing is acceptable in the Bible. Not one piece. Then we can start talking about Christianity and we can start talking about religion and we can start talking about theology. But only then. Only when you realize that the junk that you are standing on and that you are throwing outside in racist tones, that is where we need to start saying, is that Christianity? Because if that's Christianity, then understandably there's anti-Christian bias. If that is Christianity, then it makes people ashamed to be a Christian. Until next time, ciao.